Okay, welcome to another Orbiter 2010 video. And in this video, I'm on Mars. I'm in the XR2 Ravenstar. And I gave my Olympus base a bit of a cosmetic upgrade. I mentioned that in another video, but I'm not sure which one's going to get posted first. Anyway, it is currently October 18th, 2012. That's the date that I'm recording the video. This date up here is because this scenario is from when I brought the XR2 from Earth to Mars in that long 9-part series that I did back in August. So this is the save state from that video back then. This is right after I landed. If you remember, I only had 0.2% of main fuel left because I was really coming in on fumes there. So I thought it would be, a good time to take the take the XR2 back to Earth, but I don't just want to go directly back to Earth. I feel like it would be a little more interesting to take a bit of a detour. So instead of going straight from Mars to Earth, what we're going to do instead is we're going to go from Mars to Venus to Earth. So we're going to do a bit of a slingshot, and it's a little more complicated to do it that way, but I think by now people that have been watching my videos for a while are more than enough familiar with the basics of TransX, so it's kind of time to maybe up the complexity a little bit and do things a little more fun. So let's go ahead and get started. We've obviously got quite a bit of planning to do, so that's the first thing we're going to do before I worry about fueling up and all that. Now, there are a few ways that you can plan this kind of flight. There are some different tools that you can use, some external software, but I'm actually going to use Orbiter itself because for a single planet sling, it's not too terribly difficult to just sort of brute force the approach to figure out what you have to do. Now, to do this, to go from Mars to Venus to Earth, what you have to understand is that there are two dates involved. It's pretty obvious, but basically I need to find a date that will work, that will allow me to go from Mars to Venus. Venus has to be in the right place at the right time for me to go from Mars to Venus. But I also have to arrive at Venus at just the right time so that Venus is in the right place so that I can leave Venus immediately. I'm not going to land, I'm just going to sling Venus. So I can just leave Venus right away and go straight to Earth. Now, if Venus isn't in the right place, then that sling's not going to work, and it's going to send me off into, oblivious space somewhere. So it's not just simply a matter of picking a date that goes from Mars to Venus and then saying, okay, great, we're going to arrive at Venus and then sling off and go to Earth. You have to find a date at Venus that coincides, that matches up, that aligns with that arrival time. And that's kind of the tricky part. That's why slings are quite a bit more difficult than just going directly from planet to planet. And the more slings you add in, it basically becomes exponentially more difficult to get the dates to line up. So enough about that. Let's go ahead and start the planning phase and make sure I have external cooling on. Now, what I'm going to do first is I'm going to use the scenario editor to create another vessel. And this is just going to be a temporary vessel. I don't actually need it for anything. But I can't bring up TransX and use Venus as a reference while I'm sitting on Mars. It just doesn't let me do that. At least if there is a way to do it, I don't know how. So what I'm going to do is create a new vessel. And we'll just call it GLXX, be good enough. And I'll just select the standard Delta glider. It doesn't really matter. You can use any vessel. You could use, you could even use a probe. It just doesn't matter. All we need are the MFDs. Then I'm going to hit create, and I'm going to put location Venus. Okay. And that should be good enough, so we're done. Now I want to press F3, and I want to select that vessel and get inside of it. Now I'm not actually using this vessel for anything in terms of the scenario. I'm not going to fly the Delta glider. I'm only using it so that I can come here and set up TransX. And if there were a way to reference Venus from other planets, then I wouldn't even need to do this step, but I find that I have to do it this way. So this is Delta glider just sitting some arbitrary spot on Venus. I have no idea where I'm at. So the first thing I'm going to do here is find a date that will work to allow me to go from Venus to Earth. So let's go ahead and set that up. Choose escape, go forward, and we'll pick Earth. Then on this side we'll go forward to the encounter, view encounter, and now we just set up a plan for getting to Earth. Just like we normally would. Pretty simple stuff here. Go over to the eject plan, and of course Venus to Earth is prograde, so we need to raise the orbit and get out to about that point. You can see here it's the dashed yellow lines crossing over the orbit of Earth. But of course this date is not correct, so we need to move time forward. And we'll just start with course because it's going to be, we're going to be moving the time forward a lot. And what we're looking for here is just when these two lines converge. That's the orbit of Mars, or rather Earth, around the Sun, and this inner ring is the orbit of Venus. So we need these to connect. And they're coming close together there, and we're getting closer and closer. And it looks like this would be a pretty reasonable date. Now we don't have to really dial this in really close, but I just want to validate that this date would absolutely work. So let's start with that. Now let's go to our other variables, and let's go plane change. That's an awful lot of plane changes. See if the other way is better. No, it's not. Okay, so let's go this way. And let's work with the prograde a little more. Maybe go down to a finer setting at this point. Okay, so that's good enough. We can see that, with a lot of refinement, this date would allow us to get over to Earth from Venus. Now, main reason I'm not going to sit here and refine it all the way is because there's a really good chance that this date won't be that this date won't work for the sling. In other words, we probably, even though we can go from Venus to Earth on this date, there's a really good chance that we won't be able to go from Mars to Venus on this, that we won't arrive at Venus on this date. So I'm just going to make a note of this date. We've got 5, 6, 6, 1, 1. That's probably good enough. We don't need all the decimals. And now what I want to do is just go back to course, and I'm going to move time forward again to find the next time that these line up, because I'm just usually you'll need at least 3, 4, maybe even 5 dates to choose from. So I can imagine this one won't work. So let's just bump time forward to go around another cycle or two, how many ever it takes, until they line up again. And they're getting close. Let's go to a medium setting. And out here, we're in the neighborhood again. Looks like we need to bring down the prograde a little bit this time. And let's back that date up a little bit, because it's kind of overshot the perfect timing there. Okay, now let's take away a little more prograde. And let's back up the date a little more. Because you can see this would basically be your classic, I think the word is Hamann. Sometimes I have a hard time remembering how to pronounce it, but this is like your classic Hamann transfer from, you leave here, you go around 180 degrees and rendezvous on the other side. Now let's take away some prograde again. And yeah, we're in the ballpark again. Let's just do a little bit more with the date there, just to confirm that we've got a good date. Okay, maybe a little more on the plane. It's about as good as it's going to get right there. Okay, again, we're in there. So this date works. It would require more refinement, but nevertheless, we've got another date, and that's 57195. Okay, let's do this again. So we'll set the date back to course, and we'll go forward. Around and around we go until they close in. And here they're closing in again. Let's go to medium. And that's that 180 that we're looking for, so it's going to be pretty close there. Looks like we're going to need a little bit more prograde, because you can see our dashed yellow line isn't quite out to the orbit of Earth. Okay, now we can move the date forward a little more. And there we go. That's pretty good right there. We've got another date. And that's 5/7/7/7. Yeah, 4 sevens. Okay, so we've got 3 dates that will take us from Venus to Earth. So now let's see if we can make any of these dates work for going from Mars to Venus. So let's switch back over to the XR2. And for now, we're going to leave this Delta glider here on Venus. In case these dates don't work, we can come back here and just quickly, go forward and find another date. And we can just keep doing that until we've got the date. And then once we've got one that works, we can delete the Delta glider off Venus, although it doesn't really matter. We could leave it there if we wanted. So, just to understand what happened, I just pressed F3 and got back into the XR2 on Mars. So now I'm on Mars, and now I'm going to go through basically the same process that I just did for finding a date that will take me from Mars to Venus. So we'll select Escape. And in this flight, since I'm in the XR2, I'm not going to bother doing a fuel stop at Phobos. I don't think that'll be necessary. So we're going to go Escape, Forward, select Venus as our target planet, go forward on that side so we can view the encounter, and now we go to Eject Plan, and this time the prograde is actually going to be negative, because you'll see if we go positive with the prograde, that's actually saying that we want to go farther out into space, like if we wanted to go, out to Jupiter, and we don't want to do that. We actually want to go negative. So even though that might seem a little strange, like, how can you burn negative? How can you take away fuel? Well, what it is you're just getting to the other side of Mars and doing a prograde burn. So it's still a prograde burn, but you're just doing it on the other side of the planet. So anyway, we're bringing down the orbit of, we leave in the XR2 hypothetical line showing where we will end up. So we're bringing this down so that it comes into the orbit of Venus. And it's actually pretty good right there. Let's bring it down a little bit more. About like that. And incredibly enough, we actually, on this very date, we're already running into Venus. That's pretty interesting. But that doesn't mean much, because the date that we're going to run into Venus here probably won't be any of these 3 dates that we picked. So we can actually see here that the PEMJD, that would be the date that we would be arriving at Venus, is 56442. And that's not close enough to any of the dates that I picked out. First one was 56611, so that's off by a couple hundred days, close to it. So, Venus would obviously be on the other side of the solar system, so as compared to Earth. So it's definitely not where it needs to be. So now we'll come over here to the date. And we'll bump the clock forward until we run into Venus again. And it's going to be about right there, but we need to take away some of that prograde. Okay, now we can back that date off a little more. We still got too much negative prograde. And now we can back up the date more. And that's getting us in pretty close there to Venus. Now, let's just refine it. And we're already in plane, so let me just reset that. And let's just work with prograde and outward and date. Okay, let's back up the date just a little bit more. And back over to prograde. Okay, back up the date a little more. And now we're in the vicinity again. Let's just see when that arrival time is. It's 56775. Oh, that's not going to work either. It doesn't match up closely enough to any of the 3 dates that I've got figured out here. So, back to the date, and we go around again. And we're getting close here again. So we need to bring down the negative prograde again, because on this side looks like we require more delta V to get in closer. Okay, now we need to bump the date forward because you can see it's a bit off. We want it to be basically 180 across, 180 degrees across. So about right there. Now prograde to bring it down. And back to the date, move it forward a little bit. Prograde. And date. Oops. Okay, that's got us in really close. Let's see when that date is. 57114. That's not too far off from the second date that I found. Make a note of this date. I feel like it needs to be closer though. The date that I found for going from Venus to Earth that was reasonably close to this date was 57195, and we're saying that we would arrive at Venus on 57114. So it's close, but that's quite a bit of discrepancy still. It's about 80 days, and when you're talking about planets on the inner part of the solar system. Obviously, 80 days is quite a while because, the Earth rotates once every 360 days, so 80 days is like, a whole quarter orbit, or a third. Not quarter, about a quarter orbit. So it's still quite a bit. Let's see if we can find a closer date. Okay, now we need more prograde. And now I need to back that date up. Okay. And now prograde. Now we need to move the date forward a little bit. Okay, we're in the vicinity again. And that's 57448. That's definitely not going to work. That's not close to any of our dates, so around we go again. Okay. That's a little too much negative prograde. We're missing Venus at this point. Okay. Okay, now we're in the vicinity again. And this says we would be arriving at 57791. That works. Bingo, we've got a date. 57791. That's only there's less than 2 weeks difference there between the Venus to Earth, the date that I found that was 57777. So we can definitely make this date work. Yeah, let's do it. Alrighty. So now what I'm going to do Now that I've got dates that work, what I want to find out is when I'm going to be leaving Mars in order for these dates to work. So let me come over here to the eject date and write this date down. That's 5/7 57593 .7092, although we won't worry about the last few decimal points. And what I'll do is I'm actually just going to exit the scenario. I don't really need to save that stuff because I've got the dates written down. And what I need is so I just loaded the scenario that I was just looking at, and I'm going to put in the date that I found here. So that's going to be 57593, and we'll just go with that. We won't worry about all the decimal points. Now I'm going to save that. I'll call it number 2. And it's going to be called setting up the sling, because that's the next thing we're going to do. Now that we've got dates that work, we actually need to set up the sling. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end this part of the video here. I'm trying to cut my videos up into more logical sections, and I think that's a good pause point. So when we come back, I'm going to load that scenario that I just saved, the setting up the sling, and then what that's going to do is that's going to actually start us on the date that we can actually leave Mars. So all I've got to do there is just set up TransX, and then we'll be able to head out and get going. Of course, that'll probably be yet another video, because I'll probably spend a whole video just setting up the sling. So if you have any questions about what I just did in this part, go ahead and leave some comments down below, and I'll reply to any questions and comments. And I'll see you in the next part.